This show is brought to you by Whatever You Say Productions, starting conversations since 2018.
Drink up. Welcome and welcome back to episode 7 of Microscope. My name is Mike, as usual, and I am also joined by a special guest, Kevin.
Hello.
So today we're going to talk about these really super interesting things called biological soil crusts. But before we really get into that, why don't we just start off with Kevin, hi, who are you? Can you tell us anything about yourself?
Hi, Mike, and everyone. Be happy to. Thanks so much for having me on the show. Really excited to be here. This will be fun little talk. So myself, my name's
and
Kevin.
I.
I'm Kevin. I am a graduate student at Arizona State University in the Molecular Cellular Biology PhD program. I am in a lab that focuses on, as Mike alluded to, a very interesting community of microorganisms known as biological soil crust. So in terms of that,
we'll get to that. Yeah. So, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal life? Because, we've had a graduate student on here before, and she told us a little bit about what she does outside of lab. But, what do you do outside of lab?
Yeah, so outside of lab, in the few times that occurs.
Oh, few.
Yeah, definitely.
So few.
Definitely have, I'd say, 3 main things I like to spend my time doing. That being, I love working on my car. I've always been into cars. I love doing that. People don't generally want to talk about that, though. Definitely hiking and going out. Places I remember you were saying you've been trying to get out, especially around the area here in Arizona. Absolute paradise for anyone who likes getting out, going hiking, doing backpacking trips, anything outdoor nature. Definitely really try to do. But again, the lab, precludes that from time to time, or most of the time, rather.
Unfortunately.
And then the biggest thing I try to do as often as I can is I'm a musician as well. I play guitar and drums. I'm also really into digital music production, like electronic music. So super into synthesizers and drum machines, and I try to play around with that stuff.
That's so interesting. I don't think I knew that about you.
It might not have come up because we only talk about lab, and we're only in the lab.
It's so bad. It's so
really, really like that. We just want to illustrate that.
Speaking of, I actually made a new friend outside of lab.
What is that?
Doesn't even go to school right now. He has a real person's job.
Shit.
Oh, I'm half their conversations are so what do you talk about? What do you mean you can't talk about science all the time? But okay, that's interesting. Wait, so do you have a really nice car? Well, okay, wait.
Absolutely not. That's another thing. Anyone looking at grad school, that will absolutely prevent you from having a nice car. No, I have a very, very old, busted car that I like to fix up and tweak out.
Fix up an old broken car. Sounds like so much fun.
See, that's why we don't. I know what circles to have those conversations with.
So you said that you enjoy making electronic music.
Yeah.
So okay, I am actually a pretty big fan of dubstep myself. Or is that out of your realm of?
That's quite literally what got me into the whole thing. I can't say that anything I've made recently in the past 2 or 3 years would resemble that in any obvious way. But absolutely you can hear the influences of that, especially in the syncopated hi-hats and the very intense
syncopated hi-hat.
Yeah.
Oh, new word. Everybody, new word for you all. Syncopated hi-hat.
You've heard it. If you haven't heard the word, you've heard the thing itself. It's in all the music today. Literally.
Jeez, I am sweating ridiculously.
It's because it's about to rain, and it's 30 times more humid than we ever experienced.
Yeah, God, this is the northeast weather. We were just sitting there sweating.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, the Arizona weather, that dry heat thing that everybody talks about, is definitely a thing. Okay, so let's move on. So, you moved out here to Arizona, but where are you from? Or you don't have to tell us.
Oh no, I'm ready. So it kind of puts everything in context. So originally I am from the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I grew up there, my whole life up till I went to undergraduate at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. So for
Southern Illinois University.
Yeah.
SLU?
SIU, yeah.
Oh, SIU.
Yeah,
okay.
There's no L. I don't know where you got the L.
I think I thought it was Louisiana for some reason. Oh,
It's not quite that far south. So just go south 6 hours from Chicago and you're there. So you wouldn't be able to tell between just a picture of there and a picture of Louisiana quite frankly.
They both look the same.
Yeah, pretty much. And mugginess and all that. So this is, feels like right back there. Which it never feels like here.
Yeah, it's actually really surprising. Like we're sitting here, in my living room. It's about 60 degrees. I made that up, but it's about 60 degrees. But like we are just sweating. Okay, so all right, good. We know a little bit about you, but why did you get into science? So you said you're in the molecular and cellular biology track, but why? I guess what made you decide to go that route?
Ooh, that's a really good question. How much time can we allocate to this? I think
we could do like an hour.
We have 2-minute and 10-minute versions of this story.
Okay. Can we do like a 5-minute?
5-minute version? Yeah, okay, essentially. Yeah. So as I said, working on cars was always a big passion of mine. But I think it was like senior year of high school, I put it together that they're literally fucking everything up. And I'm like, oh, that changes things.
Wait, who's fucking everything up?
Internal combustion engine CO2 emissions.
Oh, cars in general are like, oh, wait, do you know this podcast is about climate change?
Yeah. Just trying to weave it in there the best we could here. Yeah, so it probably started with that. And then maybe the next couple years in community college, I actually discovered the works of Carl Sagan. And that was really a defining moment in my life. Because I realized the Christian upbringing my parents had put me through wasn't necessarily an accurate representation of the world. And now I was open to this new representation.
That's so funny you say that.
And it kind of just rolled out of control from there. I started out at SIU as a science education major, so looking to be a high school teacher, and then around the time I got into the student teaching portion of that and realized how terrible the administrative niceties of being a public school teacher can be.
Yeah.
Was about the same
time. We're over here snapping our fingers. Honey, we know.
And about that same time, a graduate student came and talked to our physics class, and he was like, did you know you get a stipend for being a graduate student? I'm like, oh, you can like have a job out of college like this? So then when I realized graduate school was a real option, that's when I switched to microbiology for the last 2 years of my undergrad. And then at that point, basically all I knew from microbiology is that I wanted to work with cyanobacteria in my graduate career.
That's interesting. Cyanobacteria?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then that's how I found the lab I am currently in. And we could go into a little ditty about.
Yeah, let's move on to that. But I just want to sort of inform all of our listeners about what a cyanobacteria is. So they're actually very closely related to what we talked about with Bianca 2 episodes ago, where they are organisms. They're essentially bacteria that eat like plants. So they absorb sunlight, and that's where they get their energy from. They're just bacteria and not, nice, beautiful plants that we have that clean our air.
Oh, they're beautiful. Take a look under the microscope.
Oh, maybe we'll post some to the Instagram.
Beautiful. Yeah, we certainly can. Yeah, so actually the organisms Bianca was talking about, those are also cyanobacteria.
Those are okay, yeah.
So it's a very large group. You see them in the ocean, you see them on the land, and that's what our lab studies.
Yeah, it's funny you actually say that because before, I do what I do now where I study the Amazon jungle, but I actually worked on sulfitic caves in Italy. So we're talking like middle of the, pitch black, never get sunlight, but we friggin' found cyanobacteria in there, And it was like, well, why the hell are they here? It's probably contamination if we're being totally honest. Like,
so that's an interesting thing. Some folks in my lab, not necessarily in the biological soil crust project, but there are species of cyanobacteria that live inside rocks. They can actually bore into the minerals in the rocks, and because light will penetrate like 1 or 2 millimeters, that's enough for them to be completely embedded in there, still receiving minute amounts of only certain types of sunlight and be able to survive.
So maybe the ones in the cave were actually just like very surviving and thriving.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They can also just eat like you and I can, eating normal the nutrients like carbohydrates and things produced by that are just there from other members of the community. So in something like that, I couldn't quite tell you about cave walls though.
Yeah, I can't either. No. I only got my master's degree in it. Okay. All right. So awesome. Let's move on to, okay. We know that you work with cyanobacteria and essentially how you got there, which honestly, thank you very much for going through all of that. Because I feel like a lot of people don't understand that the path to get into science, or like literally the path to get into anything, even though like the end tract is the same, is different for every single person. And I think it's interesting to appreciate how people get to where they are because they do think differently when they're at that point. Like, okay, we don't have to get into that. That's like another conversation. But okay.
We should, yeah.
Well, you could do it in another episode. We'll invite you back and we could talk about that. So why don't you tell us what you study about cyanobacteria?
All right. So being out in the desert here, naturally, we study the cyanobacteria that are endemic to the desert ecosystems. And the form of the community or the group of microorganisms which they coexist with out in the desert is an assemblage we call biological soil crusts. So if you go out into like a pristine, untouched region somewhere in the Phoenix Metro Valley area, there's not too much untouched around here, but go a little bit out of town to somewhere where there really hasn't been development.
Like heading south towards Tucson? When you get back down there,
once you're past South Mountain there, coming up to, what's the state park? Picacho Peak? I can't remember.
Piestewa?
Yeah, that one that's like midway. Starts with a P, it's midway between Tucson and Phoenix. Like in between here and there, probably great place to see untouched biological soil crust. And the way it'll look when you see it just out there in the desert is you'll see the kind of like maybe a tinge of reddish, tannish soil itself, but then you'll see on top of it just a black layer of, there's really no other way to describe it, just crustiness, because it's very hard, it's very dry, but in fact, this is a living layer of microorganisms.
The black stuff or the red stuff?
The black stuff. Sorry, the black crust
stuff
on top. That's just to differentiate between what bare soil looks like and what soil that's been colonized. With biological soil crust would kind of manifest as.
Awesome. So, okay, if I'm walking around in the desert and I just see like this black sandy area, you're telling me that that's like a living group of bacteria?
Absolutely, yeah.
Huh. Well, then, like, are they important or are they just like black blotches around the desert? I don't even know.
You wouldn't even believe, given their humble, exterior, that they are actually really central to the desert ecosystem. First of all, I'm not sure our background here probably talked about, basic ideas in ecology of a primary producer. So you learn about plants, right? They photosynthesize, take in sunlight, produce nutrients, and then that perpetuates throughout the ecosystem. Biological soil crusts actually play that role in a desert ecosystem because, as Mike said before, cyanobacteria get their energy exactly the same way as plants do, by absorbing sunlight, producing these nutrients. Those are then used by other microorganisms that are also part of this biological soil crust community. And as those bacterial scale interactions are taking place, as the cyanobacteria in the crust grow, they actually grow into filaments, which kind of crisscross like a tapestry. Ooh. And they will actually hold down the soil particles. So, around Phoenix here, when it rains, we have those really bad dust storms. A lot of that, at least theoretically now, there's more and more data to support it, that a lot of that loosening of the dust, freeing of the soil particles has been from actual development and construction that has disturbed these biological soil crusts.
Interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. Also, I just have to chime in with those dust storms that you were talking about are actually known as Haboobs. And yes, that's what they're called. Yes, it's amazing. Funny story about that. When I moved here to Arizona, I wasn't even here for like 48 hours. Wasn't even 48 hours. I go to a Subway or something to get a sandwich because I didn't trust the kitchen I was living in at the moment. And I was just ordering my sandwich and everybody looks outside. Wall of dust. Yeah. They were all just it's a haboob. We all just have to relax. I was like, what do you guys mean? It's you can't see anywhere. This is dangerous. I decided to go drive through it because I was like, oh, I'm a New Yorker. I could deal with anything. That was stupid. For the record, anybody who comes out here to Arizona or a desert and there's a haboob going on, don't go on the road. Yeah. It's dumb.
It's the number one thing they say. They added a little page on it in our new student orientation when you first get here.
Did they?
You see a dust storm. Yeah, you didn't go that far in the folder, did you? See a dust storm, pull over, yeah. Yes, so the biocrust we call biocrust for short to be cool. It really helps cement the
BCs.
Really helps cement those soil particles to prevent that. And then that's the other prong of our lab that has really been getting rolling over the past 4 or 5 years, as far as I understand, is that we want to see, now that we know these biological soil crusts have been disturbed, can we now learn about their community structure in the lab? What microorganisms live in them? How do they live? Are there different ones in the desert down here than are up in Utah?
There's some up in Utah?
Biological soil crusts occur everywhere on Earth where it's
regardless if it's a desert. Oh, it needs to be in a desert.
Yeah, so it's generally where there's not enough annual rainfall or moisture content in general to support regular plant life, even at the basis of moss, lichens, kind of things, very small plant life. Once you get below where that's sustainable, you'll find biological.
What is that threshold? Is it so maybe I don't know, but is it 30 inches a year?
I do not have an exact number off the
That's fine. I don't even know how you would measure that.
Yeah. But no, it is very prevalent. So in the United States, in the drier areas, right? So all throughout Arizona, Nevada, Utah.
Awesome. So you told us that biological soil crusts are just these black blotches that you can find out in the desert. But do they have any other distinctive features? Are they squares? Are they triangles? Are they lines? Are they oblong? I don't know.
Yeah, when you go out there to a spot that's very pristine, has really not been touched, it's just expansive. You'll see it as far as the eye can see. They don't really grow in any kind of patterns per se. Perhaps in a situation where maybe by a water source of some sort. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head like that, but to really see the intricacy and coolness of it, you really need to get down on your hands and knees and try to look at it laterally, because you'll actually see layers within from the underlying soil into the crust itself. And that's that striation almost looks like sedimentary rocks, if you go to the Grand Canyon and you see the layers there.
But it's dirt life.
Yeah, more or less like that. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. The other big defining feature as far as having unique abilities and being a potential biotechnology application is that some of the members of the biological soil crust community, those microbes, some of them produce their own sunscreen compounds to protect them, from the sun. So that protects the entire community. So not just the ones that are producing the sunscreen themselves, they will secrete it out of their cell. They'll push it, make it inside the cell and bring it to the outside. And then all of the other bacteria that are around it will then benefit from that protection from UV radiation. And so given that there is this natural sunscreen compound being produced in there, that's actually my PhD project, or how it started. We're trying to figure out what the chemical synthesis pathway of that sunscreen. It's called cytotonin, not super important vocabulary.
Cytotonin, new word.
Cytotonin.
We should just have like a web page of just the a glossary of the vocab that we learn.
Yeah, so that's another interesting distinctive feature that they have that you really don't find in too many other kind of systems.
Yeah, I think microbial communities are so interesting to me because they are each cell is its own individual being, right? Like us, each cell is part of one larger organism. But in these microbial communities, they're all their own distinct thing, but they act very multicellular, right? Like, I mean, you're telling me about the biological soil crust, and like, it's like they have their own melanocytes. They're sunscreen producing cells, and that's what they do. And it's the evolution of microbial communities to multicellularity is so interesting to me, and I love it.
Yeah, would you like to do another PhD?
I would like to. Hopefully,
that sounds like another PhD. That sounds like another whole lab.
That sounds like
another research center.
That sounds like
those questions.
What is it? That sounds like something I'll do if I ever graduate.
Oh, yeah, right.
Maybe that will be my career path.
Yeah.
Okay, so wait, you were talking about how the biological soil crusts like just expand. So you're talking about there's just massive expanses of black sand in the desert?
Yeah, so at that point the sand is underneath the layer of crust. But
so then it's just like a black crust that's on it.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Oh, I can't wait for you to show me a picture of this.
So generally it's black, but if you catch it at the right time, right after it rains, they turn green again. So I'm trying to think of an example. I don't have any house plants, but I think they do this.
I have thousands. Let me confirm.
If you slack off for a little bit and forget to water them, they'll start to wilt and brown a little bit.
Yep.
Take that to its logical extreme where they're completely solid and stationary.
Dead.
But at BioCrust, when they get to that point, they can still come back if they get
plants
water
die.
Plants just die.
Speaking of, you see this guy right here. Yeah. So there's a plant on the table where we're recording. This thing 2 days ago was like all droopy. Like, let me see if there's a little yellow that it suffered from. No, maybe not. Oh shit, this thing came back well. Yeah, but no, this thing was like dead. I watered it, and then look at it now. It's beautiful. It's happy. It's like those cyanobacteria after it rains.
It's exactly. And it's actually the same molecule that is green, chlorophyll, in both of them.
Wait, really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all the same. It's all the same basic parts.
Basic. Okay, because isn't there like a chlorophyll like A, B, C to Z?
Yes. So chlorophyll A is the green one you're seeing in your green plants of all kinds, but also in cyanobacteria.
Oh, I did not know that. And so just for all of our listeners, chlorophyll is basically the molecule that captures the light. Right?
Yes.
Oh, look at me. I know something.
Very good, straightforward one-sentence explanation.
That's it. All right, so I feel like I've asked you a bunch of questions. But I feel like there's biological soil crust can go in like multiple different ways, right? Like, I mean, you could think about it in so many different ways. Are there any questions that someone else has asked you? Because I know you do a lot of outreach, which is actually the main reason why I was just like, oh God, we have to have Kevin on here. So he loves talking to people that aren't scientists. So yeah, I guess like what is like the most difficult question you've ever gotten, and we're still able to answer?
Ooh, okay. I have one, but I definitely wasn't able to answer it. This man's question was so personal and well thought out. It just demonstrated just a very scientific approach to thinking. But I have no idea what this guy did, but it was at the March for Science last year.
In DC?
No, the one here. There was a little thing here, yeah. But he came up and asked because I had some biological soil crust samples there.
So you disturbed it.
A colleague of mine took it very gently on a petri dish. Yeah, we got the whole. So this man asked me, because he was looking at the biological soil crust samples I had out at this little table we were out there, and he asked me, that's interesting. I see in my yard I have 2 Palo Verde trees, and one of them, the soil around it kind of looks like this. It kind of has this crusty black character to it. And then the other tree in the yard doesn't have anything like that. It just looks like sand around the base. And the one that does have what looks like biocrust around it will green up a lot later in the season, or it will recover from drought not as quickly, or I might be getting this totally backwards. It might have been the other tree. And really, I had no idea what to tell him. That was a really interesting scientific question. He had identified a single variable that was different between these 2 more or less identical conditions, which he just had
in his backyard. Yeah.
So this was that really struck me as being, it's not always so cut and dry in our real life to be able to ask a very directed scientific question where he really had a hypothesis. Basically, was, does this biocrust have an effect on the growth or the resilience of these trees in my yard? So that was probably the coolest thing I've been asked about biological soil crust. We hit most of the others of people like, oh yeah, I'm out hiking, I see that all the time. I always kind of wondered what it was. And then,
should I go step on it? Right? Is
that's the conversation we have next.
So thinking about the biological soil crust in the trees, from like what I know about how bacteria help promote growth of plants, I'd have a feeling that the tree with the biological soil crust has richer soil because of all those bacteria just leaching out all that crap, or the stuff, the nutrients, the good stuff.
Absolutely.
Not the crap.
Yeah.
Well, their crap.
Yeah, which is good for us. Very good for us. We wouldn't be nowhere without their crap.
So yeah, I think that would make sense.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There are so some bacteria can do something called nitrogen fixation. So if you're into planting or farming or gardening, that's what they call it.
Is that what they're calling it these days?
You'll look in the ingredients list on your fertilizers and you'll see nitrogen containing compounds like ammonium nitrate is one of them. So the reason you have to supplement that for your plants is because even though the Earth's atmosphere is overwhelmingly composed of nitrogen gas.
Isn't it 70%? I think it might be more.
Very large majority.
Yeah, like 80% something.
I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah. But cyanobacteria, or certain species of cyanobacteria, can actually pull that nitrogen out of the Earth's atmosphere and fix it to
a biologically usable source.
Precisely, yeah. So that would be an example of the biocrust seeding the soil or the ecosystem around it.
For the Palo Verde.
Yeah.
And also for anyone who has not seen a Palo Verde tree, they are the most beautiful things I've seen.
Yeah, sir.
They're basically just like a tree with like yellow leaves and flowers, and the trunk is green. Like it's like a weird looking tree. Yeah. It looks like it belongs in like a fairy garden or something. Okay. So moving on, right? We know that destroying these biological soil crusts make these haboobs worse, right? So I guess like, what should we do if we see them while we're out hiking or things like that? Like, especially, I've noticed a lot of my friends are venturing out into Utah lately. So like, For those of you listening, this is what you should do when you visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Get out there, go hiking, but as
Wear
anyone will
sunscreen.
tell you, just stay on the trail. That's really all there is to it. So the trails have been, generally they're kept by some kind of park services, whatever municipal level you're looking at. And outside of that, that's totally fair game for biological soil crust to be growing, especially when you're out in the hotter, drier regions of Arizona and Utah. And the thing about biological soil crust, even though they're very good at surviving in their environment, given the pressures they're generally under, they are very vulnerable to compressional forces. So being stepped on, being driven over with an ATV is a huge problem up in Utah, where off-roading is a very popular pastime. And that's really what begins the degradation of the biological soil crust community. Is if it gets crushed, you're breaking those filaments because everything's so dry, it's not flexible. It will just break things up. And then, from there, it can just get blown away. And then you have exposed topsoil. Losing topsoil, of course, leads to haboobs. Absolutely not good for agricultural purposes, though these are generally mutually exclusive where crust is and where agriculture is happening. Agriculture being another big detriment to biological soil crust.
Interesting.
Kind of ecosystems.
It's actually really funny because I was listening to you, but then you also said the word haboob again. Mm-hmm. So I think we should do a tally of how many times we said the word haboob in this episode. Bet you was 20.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the comments, go ahead, put your guess. Do you have prizes?
We don't have prizes. You get a signed piece of paper. That's about all we can afford.
All right.
So awesome. You know what? Thank you so much, Kevin, for coming here and joining us and talking about biological soil crust, because I think it's something that not a lot of people know about, right? If I was out walking in the desert and I just saw a bunch of black stuff, I'd be like, it's dirty soil. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't think twice about it, especially me, who has the problem of trying to bring down the patriarchy and always go off the trails. And now I know, don't keep your shit together, Mike. Yeah. God, okay. So
in a literal sense,
in
a sense. Go off the trail in your life.
So at the end of every episode, we like to sort of close with something our viewers at home can do. And while most of our viewers don't know the demographics or exact percentages, but whoever comes out to visit Utah and or Arizona or, any of these places where biological soil crusts are very common, please don't go and step on it. But for those that are, going out and hiking in all these other areas, the one thing that I can give you as advice is don't feed the animals.
Boom.
So I don't know if you follow us on Instagram, you should, but I posted the other day about me feeding this adorable little squirrel a flaxseed chip. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I was like, this is amazing.
Here?
Yeah,
right
here.
On campus?
No. I was over on Piestewa Peak. I was sitting there eating my cracker, and this squirrel walks up to me and was just yeah, I want.
Oh yeah, no.
He didn't eat it. He didn't eat it. So I didn't do anything wrong. But so for everyone at home, don't feed the animals, because there's a big thing about the human microbiome and how it can affect our health. Well, other animals have microbiomes, and by feeding them human food like Doritos or flax seeds or things like that, you could really injure them. And
yeah, so definitely going along with not feeding the animals, the down the road consequences of that you can have is they get so used to being able to obtain human food quite easily that they will kind of pass that down, as far as I understand, to their offspring. And then what that ends up doing is putting these animals under completely different pressures to survive than their ancestors had been used to in the wilds. And then what happens when all humans are gone, which doesn't seem too far off from this point. But what are they going to do then? So think about the animals. Don't feed the squirrels.
We need to protect the animals. That's really interesting because as we select for squirrels that, well, okay, maybe not all squirrels in general, like any animal, but like as we select for them, getting their source of food from us, like they need us. And then if anything happens to us, they're screwed.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
Just when you all thought you were going to get away with an episode without Samantha, you were wrong. I'm just kidding. Guys, fantastic job. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. It was such a delight to have you.
Oh.
Will you be returning?
Love to. Anytime. I live right by Mike.
He knows where I live, everyone.
We would be so tickled if you would return. So once again from Microscope, my name is Samantha.
My name is Mike.
Kevin.
And you just listen to Microscope. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening to Microscope, presented by Whatever You Say Productions. Learn more at microscopepodcast.com. That's MIKROSCOPEPODCAST.com.